Welcome to Steel City News. We got a chance to see some more really cool cars this past Wednesday at the Pittsburgh International Dragster Reunion. It was a great event, met a lot of really cool people, saw a lot of great cars, and we also learned the importance of hearing protection.
Ted Bryan, and these are all the guys
Mark Becker.
The car a lot. Mark Becker, Andy Barron, Pete Caulfield.
Okay, so can you tell me about the car?
It's a 1934 Ford with a Donovan Chrysler Hemi. Runs on nitromethane for fuel, supercharged and fuel injected. It weighs about 2,200 pounds and somewhere around 3,000 horsepower. It's probably the first nostalgia car in the country. It was built in 1980 by a guy named Ed Quay and myself. Ed Quay also built pro stock cars for Bill Jenkins. And Eddie was a friend of mine, and we just came up with the idea to build this car. Nobody could figure out why. But first time we took it out to track in Maple Grove and lit the tires up for eternity, people understood why. It was like a throwback to the way racing used to be 40 years previously.
So very nice. So how long have you been into racing?
Since I was about 16, in various. That Roadrunner over there was my car also. That was a record holder in B-modified production, and then Mark and I built that car in 1970 and ran it for a year, and then we went into fuel dragsters and stuff. Then raised families like everybody here and had a hiatus, and then came back later, and I repurchased this car didn't even know it existed still, from a guy, a very famous drag racer, a guy named Walt Austin, out in Tacoma, Washington in 2013, I guess. And the car hadn't been seen or anything for 25 years, and Mark and I and guys all rehabbed the thing and got it so it would we could put it back on the track. It's probably one of the only cars, they call them cackle cars, one of the only ones in the country that can actually go down the track legally. It's all NHRA certified, and we've run all over the country with it.
Jim Griffith, and this is my antique and collectible replica Cobra. It's a 1967 replica of the 427 Cobra, and I've had it 14 years, and this is only the second time that it's been out. And I built it, I painted it, and I made a lot of other really nice things for it, because I used to be in the Air Force in the aircraft sheet metal repair shop. So I made all kinds of things for it. Well, I've always been interested in them since I was young. There was a guy in our town who happened to have an original 289 one, and I remembered it. And then I've seen a few of them around, and I happened to get a magazine that had some advertisements, and then I called up to Buffalo, New York, where it was, and I went up and visited them and ended up buying one from them. But I changed a lot of things differently than what they had, because I wanted to update it to newer and better things. So, and it's a handful to drive.
It's a 63 Plymouth Polaro. I built the motor in it. I bought maybe 15 or 20 years ago. I've had it for a long time. And it's just this good-looking car, good-running car. And so Jimmy called me and invited me out here for the 50. I used to race at PID, and I race Chrysler cars. So, but it's a nice car. It's a good car. It runs better than it looks.
Yeah, it looks. I think it looks great. So what got you into the Plymouth?
I've had them for years. I have a whole bunch of them. I have a bunch of collector cars, Hemis and lightweight cars and stuff like that. There's a lot of people around here that, that have all these cars put away, which I did for years. So that's your retirement. If they're worth a lot of money now. They weren't when we got them, but.
Hey, Lou Tournay.
Okay, so tell me, what do we have behind us right here?
We have a 1987 Monte Carlo Aero Coupe, strictly made for the Daytona 500 in 1987, when Bill Elliott in the Firebird was running away with it, and all the NASCAR guys were crying. So they slipped the back window on this and made it sleek. And there's only 3,001 of these, 3,010 made, and it's a very rare, awesome car. I did tune it up a little bit. I put a 383 stroker in it with about 550 horsepower, and a little bit of chrome.
All right, so tell me about this back window.
This is when Bill Elliott in the T-Bird had that sleek back, he was running away. He, ran Talladega at 213 miles an hour. No one could keep up with him. So Earnhardt and all the guys were complaining. So Chevy come out and made this big sleek back window. This window alone is $5,000 if I broke that. So that's what made them be more competitive. And of course, they won a lot of races in NASCAR with this car. But it's very, very rare. Only 3,000 of these were made.
And you did all this work yourself. Do you know how many hours you think you put into this?
Oh, 1,000 hours, 8 months straight, every day, every night, going to work, coming back home and work on this. I did this thing it was bad when I got it, and turned into something like this. I love it.
Rick.
Okay, can you tell me about the Camaro behind us?
Yeah, it's a 69 Camaro Pro Street. It's got a 396 bored out to a 408, probably about 550 horsepower. It'll set you back in the seat a bit. It's what it's called Pro Street, means full roll cage, tubbed rear end, meaning fat tire, shortened axle, built for drag racing, but street legal. I bought it pretty much finished. I've done things to it. New transmission, rebuilt the rear axle, added chrome to it, and I love it. So, runs good, and matter of fact, coming down here, it ran on 7 cylinders, and I didn't even know it. It was running so good. One of the spark plug wires was off, and it's sweet. I have another car I'm getting out on the road soon, another Pro Street car. That's what I love. And I've wanted a 69 Camaro all my life, and I got this about 4 years ago, and I really enjoy it. Growing up, I was around a lot of neighbor guys and friends that had hot rods, and I just fell in love with 69 Camaros and 69 Chevelles too. A Chevelle is a little more roomy. I probably should have went that route being a big guy, but I've always wanted one of these Camaros, and I wanted one original, but when I found this one, I really liked it, and the time was right. So I enjoy this sport, and today's wonderful. There's 800 and some cars here, and awesome cars, every one of them.
Bob Dempster, local guy from Bridgeville here, Bridgeville area. It's a 36 Ford Cabriolet. It's Viper Blue, the color is, and it took me 22 years to get it where it's at.
Okay, so what first got you into this particular car?
My brother, he always had old hot rods, and a lot of them were 36 Fords, and as a kid I fell in love with that particular model, and that's what I've owned 2 times now. And I actually painted the car, and friends helped me out doing some of the body work and different things on it to get it this way. But I learned to paint in a paint shop, and some guys took me under their wings, and a lot of friends guided me through, and I painted a 2-car garage, and I'm very proud of it.
My name's Gary O'Data. I live in South Fayette Township.
Okay, so tell me about the car behind us.
This is a 66 Chevelle convertible. I've had it for 17 years. This car was shipped from Miami to Pittsburgh to be auctioned off. This car was owned by Dan Marino. Danny Marino, the Pitt quarterback, Hall of Fame, and Miami Dolphin. Dan shipped this car to John Soretti Motors in Moon Township back in March of 2000. And a friend of mine spotted this car at Soretti's and called me, and I went out. And I had no idea whose car this was until the salesman told me this was Dan Marino's. So I did some checking up, and sure enough, this car was owned by Danny. I put about $15,000 in this car since I've had it. And I worked for Channel 4 News. I was a photographer, and I was covering the Mario Lemieux Celebrity Golf Tournament in Nevelwood in June of '03. And Dan Marino was up there with John Elway and Michael Jordan and Barkley and a slew of other sports celebrities. And Dan came over and signed the dashboard. He was so nice, it was ridiculous how nice he was. But Dan had the car in Miami for 5 years. He actually bought the car, Dan bought the car from the equipment manager of the Miami Dolphins. He wanted to get rid of it. So Dan bought the car in '95. He had it till 2000. Then he shipped it up here, and I got it.
Wow, very nice. So,
It's a rare piece.
so how many hours did you say was spent restoring the car?
It took me 3 years. It took me 3 years with help from other people that are in the car restoration business. And it took 3 years, but it was worth it. You name it, I did it to this car. And I'm just very fortunate to have the car. Very fortunate.
Walt Malone and my grandson Kevin Malone.
Okay, so tell us about the car behind us.
Okay, this is a 1935 Ford. I picked it up, the car was sitting for about 13 years, and a friend of mine informed me it was a 1932 Ford, and I already had one of those, but when I went to see it was a 35 Ford, and then I was very interested because my uncle used to have a 35 Ford when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I remembered it. So I was very interested. The car came from New York originally, and it was sitting for 13 years. It was full of mice and everything else.
So a lot of work went into this.
Yes, a lot of work, and my friend Rick is the one that did a big percentage of the work, and I was his supervisor.
So you oversaw the whole process.
Right, he was teaching me as we were going along. I knew a little bit about it, but not as much as he did.
Now, how did you decide what you wanted in terms of detail, like the flames,
Well, I'm a man of the 50s. So basically what I wanted was mostly a car that had the 50s style. The flames were basically what we had back in those days. And the coupes, of course, in this were the big thing back in the 50s. And doles, and we put flamethrowers on it. And my grandson here, he loves to throw the flames.
I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Yeah, right. That's the big thing, yeah. So later on, when it gets a little dark, get a chance to look at them.
Ray Deal from Scott Township, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so tell me about the car behind us.
It's a 78 Dodge Magnum GT, one of 861 built by Dodge. And I'm the original owner. Got 57,000 miles on it. And all our girls drove it when they were young. So this original paint, one set of new tires on it. I just love this car.
So what got you interested in this particular car? What do you like about the Dodge?
I like the front end of it. And then to get a GT, had special wheels. It's a GT package that's deluxe interior, police car wheels, and they're coated and Goodyear tires.
I started racing in about 1962 with a 32 Ford I had, and I got fairly famous for that. I won a lot of races and national records with that. And then I retired that car in 1973, and I built this car to race. I raced this car up through 1989 or 90, and put it away for 25 years, and I just took it out three and a half years ago and made a street car out of it. And now I'm going to have some fun with it on the street, and that's my bucket list. And instead of buying a Corvette or something, I wanted something that I actually built. I built the whole car myself, painted it, built the engines. I had some help from the machine shop in New Brighton, bought a machine, and other than that, it's been quite an interesting project. I'm glad. It's a fun car to drive. It's really, it's different. It's fun. It's got a lot of power. It's got a lot of zip. Hopefully I don't get in trouble with it.
Bob Tursick, Crazy Bear Vega, 1972 blown alcohol Vega. We run the Great Lakes Nostalgia Funny Car Circuit. We just finished the Funny Car Nationals this weekend in Pittsburgh. This car is a recreation of a car I worked on in high school with a buddy of mine. So he was here this weekend. We also had Arnie Karp from the 70s with the Boston Strangler. So these two cars recreated a race that was run 47 years ago. So that's what's going on with this car.
My name's Tom Barnhill. They call me Terrible Tom Barnhill. I got that name back when I was flat track racing motorcycles and went out and did a few laps, and the announcer said, "Who is that guy? He's terrible."
Great.
This is a replica of a 1964 Garlitz chassis with the chute pack body. Back in 1964, you bought these parts from a catalog, and it would come as a kit, and you would do different parts. You could buy a complete car, or you could buy the front end or assembly one at a time. And I have an old catalog to look back, and the prices are unbelievable. If you wanted the car painted, it was an extra $40, any color you want.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. And what this is a replica of that car. They're called cackle cars. And we're not allowed to race them because they're not up to current specs for safety and equipment on board. Rules have changed quite a bit. And back in 1968, the owner and driver of this car was Tommy Reese, and it was sponsored by Brocker Speed Shop. And Tommy set the mile-per-hour record at Pittsburgh International Dragway of 221 miles an hour in that car. And Mike Snively, a California driver, had the ET record at 671. And back in those days, my brother and I were the crew for Tommy Reese, and we got to travel all over the East Coast and Michigan, and it was a great time. Things were so much simpler then. There weren't as many rules, and it looked like, from our standpoint now, the cost was a lot cheaper, but it was actually an equal amount of money. It was equally hard to get. And most of the guys like Tommy, they had full-time jobs. So they would race on the weekend and had to be back at work on Monday morning, and we're doing it too. So now this car, we're going to fire up here. We did one earlier today. We're firing it up on 90% nitromethane. And nitromethane is called CH3NO2, and what we like to jokingly say is CH3NO2 is the formula for converting money into noise. That's all we do. We bring it out here and fire it up for the fans, shoot flames and get the good odors in the air, shut it down, go back and sit in the lawn chairs and tell stories about how fast we used to be, which are all lies.
So how many miles per gallon would something like this get?
This thing, we're not even putting the engine under a load, and that's a 4-gallon tank. And if I do a 3-minute run out here, it empties the tank. And that fuel now is, we buy it in a 55-gallon drum with 53 gallons in it to allow room for expansion. And its price varies from $800 to $1,100 plus $200 shipping, and so it can get pretty expensive. Each time we fire it up like this, that's good for about $175 when you look at the oil that has to be changed at the end, the filter, the spark plugs, the nitro. The nitro is 90% mixed with methanol alcohol, which is a lot cheaper, but you still have to purchase all that. And plus, there's a lot of work when you're done with it. Because that stuff is corrosive, you have to blow all the lines out and oil the pump, change the engine oil, change spark plugs, adjust the valves, retorque the heads, and cut the oil filter open to see if there's any unusual metals in there, meaning something's about to happen, which you'd like to catch before it happens. You know. But it's all for fun. You know,
Looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's these are all our old buddies. Jim Senkowitz over there at the PID booth. He used to work the line and run the show. He still announces out at Keystone Dragway. He puts on all these events for us and a lot of organizing. Oh, him and Bill Truby and other guys are they're doing that out of their pocket. You know, it's not like they're getting funded for this. So we have a big reunion party in February, first Thursday in February at the Fairview Fire Hall here in Bridgeville. And we just pack the place. And everybody gets back together. And it's amazing how many guys actually participated. Of course, we're losing them at a high rate now at an old age. I'm only 72 now, but there are a lot of guys that are a little older and some younger that have left us, which is a shame. You know, we always hate to see those guys go. But a lot of these cars here actually ran, not only the dragsters, ran at Pittsburgh International Dragway and Keystone. It was a fun time for us. You know, we were just in the right place at the right time. It's not that we knew anything more than anybody else. We would go up to a junkyard and roll over these Chrysler Imperials or 300s that are worth fantastic amount of money and cut the engines out of them. And when you look back on that stuff, it's, oh my God, what have we done, you know? And but that's starting to dry up now. My buddy's car, Ted Bryan's 134 fuel coupe, actually still races. And that orange funny car up there, Bobby Martin, he actually races too. The rest of us just make noise and tell stories.
If you like what we're doing covering positive news in the greater Pittsburgh area, head over and like our page, Steel City News. We appreciate your support.